Where am I pointing? Here we go. Okay. So in terms of the issues addressed in the paper, this is just here to kind of give you a sense of the kinds of topics that are believed to be potential or candidates for discussion and work through in this process. And as you would appreciate, there's lots of different ways you could skin this cat. You can group them into different topics, give them different names. You can combine some issues with other issues. But this is how we landed. Basically, we have a set that we refer to as use or activity issues, and then a set that relate to the marine environment and cultural values. And I just want to say before we just whip through these that, I don't think it's fair that anyone would get the impression that there's nothing in place or that there's nothing being done in these topics or these uses, because there's lots being done by government and non-government organizations, First Nations. But I think the key point is the stuff that's being done isn't always or necessarily integrated, and that's what PNCIMA is supposed to be all about. So the topics that the paper deals with are transportation and vessel safety, maritime defense and security, commercial fisheries, recreation fisheries, First Nation fisheries. Also deals with recreation and tourism, cruise ships and the like. Marine aquaculture, which could include fish farms as well as shellfish. Renewable ocean energy such as wind, wave, and tidal. There's also a section on non-renewable ocean energy, essentially oil and gas in this part of the world. And there is a section on existing land and coastal plans that have been done by First Nations and governments. On the environment and culture side, the topics that are identified in the paper are essentially marine protected areas, cultural resources, marine spills, marine pollution, climate change effects, aquatic invasive species, and species at risk or species of concern. So that when you eventually see the discussion paper, you'll see a page to 2 pages on these topics. Again, very high flyover. There's lots of intricacies around these things. And another point I'll make here is that another point here is that issue linkages and interactions are important. Why is PNCIMA a vehicle for addressing these topics? Well, many issues are linked in terms of their potential effects on each other, and potential solutions. There are potential solutions available through planning outcomes and products. For example, you're not going to be able to deal with MPAs, as you know, without considering the effects of MPAs on commercial activities, impacts on First Nations use, and other aspects. The ones that I've picked to highlight, because I was asked to just do a quick high flyover, was to pick the topics that, in my sense, might find their way into planning at the 3 different levels of planning. And if you haven't picked up on that, there is in the material and the mandate around large ocean planning the concept of doing planning at the large area, but also at the smaller coastal management areas, and even an intermediate planning area, which is referred to as a geographical management area. So the North Coast, for example, might be a geographical management area of planning, and a specific bay within the North Coast might be the subject of a coastal management plan. Integrated management is an opportunity to develop issue management solutions that recognize and reconcile the effects on all uses, on all users, and that's again a good reason for having a process underway that has active participation of all the different interests. In that, you will end up with solutions that take into account the implications of any one solution on other users. Humor me. I don't know if I'm pointing in the right place. There it is, I guess. Okay. What am I doing here? Stop the clock. Yeah, could you go to the transportation, the very first one here? Yeah. There we go. Okay. So that's my presentation. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. Okay. Transportation and vessel safety. Again, I'm not going to dwell on any of these, but it's a key activity issue. You'll see in your pamphlet that there's a proposal to set up an actual working group on this topic. It's pervasive. It has implications for many other issues that you can read for yourself up there. Implications for invasive species, species at risk, cultural resources, commercial, recreation, and First Nations fisheries, and other aspects. The challenges around this, there's a number, but the key one is how are you going to manage increases that are projected if some of these proposals in the Kitimat area and if expansion of Prince Rupert Port occurs as expected. How are you going to manage those increases in this process, and how are you going to manage increasing vessel traffic of all kinds? Because marine transportation is in many ways the lifeblood of the communities up there, and it's not an easy thing to just say, okay, well, we're going to reduce the risks by not having marine transportation. We're talking ferries, water taxis, recreational boats, commercial fishing boats, etc. So that's a key issue. Now I'm going to the next slide, hopefully. Here we go. I've combined these. They're separated out in the paper, but commercial and recreational fisheries, as I think it's pretty obvious to many of the people here who are involved in that. These are key activities that have major economic significance to the coast. They're an important part of the culture. They're interrelated to many other issues. Again, some of those issues, MPA establishment, marine pollution, all those things affect or are affected by the PNCIMA approach to commercial and recreational fisheries. And conflicts with other uses, again, are significant. A major challenge here is how are you going to deal with the fact that there are changes in species type and abundance and distribution, and stocks are generally declining in for many species. So that's another big issue. Moving on here to First Nations fisheries. That's, again, something that the group wanted to underscore. The First Nation gathering and harvesting of marine fish, plants, invertebrates for food, social, ceremonial purposes. It's important in many ways. You often hear First Nations talk about the ocean being their refrigerator, and it's true. First Nations have and continue to depend on ocean food resources. And it's a very important consideration in anything provincial and federal governments do, because and conservation initiatives, because of not just that reliance on the food, but there are court obligations, constitutional rights at stake as well. Major challenges, effect of changing abundance of fish stocks, again, and the potential effects of many other activities and uses on the food abundance and the health and the quality. Cultural resources is another one. Heritage, these essentially fall into the categories of archaeological sites, historical sites, and First Nations traditional use sites. Again, another important thread in a lot of the work or a lot of the issues that PNCIMA will deal with. It's an important issue for First Nations, but also for coastal communities, because in many respects, the historical features and the history of the area are part of the not just the well-being, but the actual raison d'etre of those communities and their sense of identity. Challenges there. There's not a lot of inventory on these areas, particularly traditional uses, traditional use sites. Formal protection is an issue. How do you protect it and at what level? There's issues around surveillance, management, enforcement of cultural resources, and potential destruction and loss due to not just human disturbance, but climate change, increased storm events. That's a big issue in Haida Gwaii, I understand. So that's another issue that's highlighted in the paper.